In Season 22, a lot of our exotics got some buffs, and this is one I was really excited to try out. Now, this build is going to be all about crowd control and buffing your defensive capabilities. We're going to heavily invest into our Duskfield Grenade alongside being able to regenerate it pretty much all the time, and we will also be playing into other stasis verbs such as crystals and shards. This build is a ton of fun, and it's honestly really strong in every bit of content in the game. Really quick before we jump into it, again, I just want to say thank you all so much for the most recent support on the channel. My videos have been doing pretty well lately, and it's all thanks to you all, and I really hope you all are enjoying them. With that being said, if you are a new or returning viewer, consider subscribing and dropping a like. All the support goes a long way, and it really does help the channel out, and I truly appreciate every single bit of support that you all show. All right, let's jump right into it, and first off, let's start off talking about our Duskfield, since this is going to be the main integral part to this build. So your Duskfield Grenade will be able to make a dome, and inside of that dome, you're going to slow and eventually freeze targets that are inside of it. In its base form, it's already pretty decent for crowd control, but of course we're going to amplify that. Another thing to note is that the Duskfield Grenade has a 1 minute and 31 second cooldown, one of the fastest grenade cooldowns in the game, which obviously we're going to buff up. Now, the other way we're going to amplify our Duskfield Grenade is with Touch of Winter. So this basically buffs all your grenade, but specifically Duskfield increases slow field size and creates a small stasis crystal on impact. So as you see here, the Duskfield Grenade size is definitely increased, and you also will make a stasis crystal, which will help out with some fragments later in the build. Having a bigger field means more crowd control and more enemies should walk into it. Now, the final way we're going to buff up our Duskfield is with our newly buffed Renewal Grasp. This has the exotic perk Depths of Duskfield. Your Duskfield grenades have a much larger effect radius. Allies inside the Duskfield take reduced damage, and targets inside the area deal reduced damage. So what's really cool is that Renewal Grasp and Touch of Winter will actually stack, and as you can see, it makes an even larger Duskfield radius, and that stasis crystal in the middle now becomes a large stasis crystal instead of a little small one. The bigger stasis crystal will be better for ad clear if you do shoot the crystal, but you can also kind of view it as a pillar to hide behind if you're standing in the Duskfield. That's really good for your defensive capabilities, because with Renewal Grasp you also have the aspect of taking reduced damage when you're in your Duskfield Grenade, so you can kind of have a wall to hide behind alongside taking the reduced damage while in the Duskfield. On top of that, if there is an enemy inside of the Duskfield, not only are they going to be slowed and eventually froze, but they will also deal reduced damage to you while you are getting that increased damage resistance, so you pretty much become unkillable if you're in the Duskfield. This is a great support exotic, and I could see it being extremely strong with things like First Checkpoint and Crota, where you're running from totem to totem. You can throw a Duskfield on each one, and then any thrall that gets inside will be slowed, and your whole team will be taking reduced damage. Now, I do want to point out that obviously Stasis didn't get any crazy buffs this time around, or really anything related to the artifact, but the Renewal Grasp did get a buff. If you don't know, back in the day, they pretty much gave this exotic a fixed grenade cooldown rate, and it made it pretty much useless because you couldn't regenerate your Duskfield extremely fast. With Season 22, they actually did end up reverting that change, so it's not technically a buff, it's just going back to its former self, but honestly, to me, that is enough to still make it really, really strong. So that's everything on increasing that Duskfield potency, but let's look at some smaller things in our subclass that will help out with the overall aspect of the build. And to start off, let's take a look at our second aspect we're going to be running, Grim Harvest. So defeating slowed or frozen combatants creates stasis shards. These shards grant you melee energy when picked up by you or allies. So now just every time you defeat a slowed or frozen targets, which are going to be all the time with this build, because you're going to throw grenades everywhere, and even with your exotic we'll get into later, you're going to be able to make stasis shards like crazy. These will have a very unique benefit with our exotic weapon, but for now, all you need to know is that this will also grant you extra melee energy, which is nice, so you can spam those a little bit more to slow enemies more often. The other main part is that this gives you 3 fragment slots, which is really nice for this build, because you can play into a lot of fragments that really do help support this build. First off, we will be running Whisper of Fissures, so increases the damage and size of the burst of stasis when you destroy a stasis crystal or defeat a frozen target. Since you're going to be freezing enemies everywhere with this build, alongside your Duskfield making a stasis crystal, and even your weapon also being able to make crystals, you can blow these up all the time for some extremely strong ad clear. And even if you just throw your Duskfield on something like a champion, it will increase the burst of the stasis damage. And a side note, what's really cool about stasis and the Duskfield specifically is that it can deal with every champion. Slow will stun overload. If you shatter and unstoppable, it will stun that. And technically it can deal with anti-barrier because it can constantly keep freezing them over and over again. Now our next fragment is going to be Whisper of Durance. Slow that you apply to targets lasts longer. For those abilities that linger, their duration will also increase. So this is another way you're going to be buffing your Duskfield Grenade. It will last a little bit longer. The slow itself will also last a little bit longer. And of course that correlates to even more crowd control or even more survivability for you if you're standing inside of the Duskfield. And then next up, we're going to be running Whisper of Shards. Shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts your grenade recharge rate. Shattering additional stasis crystals increase the duration of this benefit. What's really cool about this is since your Duskfield makes a stasis crystal, this just means you can shoot that crystal immediately if you want to get some grenade recharge rate, but you will also have your weapon also making crystals as well, which you can then also shoot to further increase your grenade cooldown rate. This fragment is a must for this build if you do want to spam Duskfield grenades everywhere, because it greatly increases your grenade recharge rate, and you can have one pretty much up at all times. And then our next fragment is going to be Whisper of Chains. So while you're near frozen targets or a friendly stasis crystal, you take reduced damage from targets. This is going to pair extremely nice with the second part of the Renewal Grasp exotic. So if you're in your Duskfield grenade, you take reduced damage. Now if you also are standing beside a crystal, you take even more reduced damage. It will buff that ×2 resist up to a ×3 resist, and also just when you freeze targets, you also will have a damage resist, which you will be doing all the time. This fragment with Renewal Grasp makes you extremely tanky, and it is extremely hard to kill you. And then finally, I'm going to be running Whisper of Rending. Primary ammo weapons do increased damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets. The reason I like to run this is because this will make your primary be able to one-shot the stasis crystals, which again is extremely strong for ad clear, on top of giving you that grenade cooldown rate. And you're also going to be freezing targets all the time with your Duskfield, and even your weapon, which I promise we're going to get to in 1 second. And you can constantly get this increased primary damage on these enemies. This is extremely strong for things like champions if you do have to use primary ammo against them, and it just makes the ease of use with this build a lot more effective. And then for the other little things, Silence the Skull is a pretty good ad clear super if there is a very high ad dense area. On top of that, you can't just throw it on a boss and let the shatter keep proccing over and over again, since you are running Whisper of Fissures for some extra damage. I do like to run Marksman Dodge just to reload my weapon. And then Withering Blade is also not a terrible melee, because this will slow enemies, eventually freeze them, and again, you will have a lot of these with Grim Harvest. Alright, but let's jump over into stats, and first off, you want to take 100 resilience to get that 30% damage reduction. This will stack with your Renewal Grasp and even your Fragment Whisper of Chains, and you just become almost unkillable. And again, you can play around that stasis crystal to kind of have a wall up just so nothing can shoot you. And then next up, you definitely want to go with 100 Discipline so you can get a faster Duskfield grenade cooldown rate. As you can see, it buffs it to a 45-second grenade cooldown, which is crazy paired with your Fragment Whisper of Shards, because you will have these up again all the time. And then if you can get triple 100s, definitely go with Recovery just for some extra survivability. If you want to play in mobility, that is obviously also fine. Having more Marksman dodges to reload your weapon for a DPS scenario is extremely good. I just like to go with Recovery so I can regenerate my health a little bit faster, and if I'm being honest, this was a triple 100 I could get. I could only get 90 mobility, and I wanted to look a little better. Regardless of that though, let's jump over into our weapons, which actually play a major point in this build. The one I've been hinting at all video is the Wicked Implement. Now, I know when this weapon came out, it was definitely not the strongest, but it actually did receive some pretty hefty buffs with this season. So to start off, this has the exotic perk Creeping Attrition. Rapidly landed precision hits cause targets to become slowed. This is extremely strong because that slow can also lead to a freeze, which again can deal with every single champion, but on top of that, the slow and freeze will also synergize with everything else in this build. This did get buffed so the Creeping Attrition lasts a little bit longer, so you have more time to use it before the buff falls off. Next up, you have Tithing Harvest. So destroying stasis crystals or precision final blows while Creeping Attrition is active create a stasis shard that will return to you. Collecting stasis shards refills the magazine. Now this is really good because we've already talked about how destroying those crystals are going to be really good for ad clear alongside giving you increased grenade regeneration rate, but now you're also going to make a stasis shard that will track to you and refill your magazine. On top of that, if you do get precision kills while Creeping Attrition is active, it will also make stasis shards that can track to you and refill your magazine. And they also made it so any stasis shard from your subclass with things like Grim Harvest will also do the exact same thing. Unfortunately, the Grim Harvest shards won't track to you, but they will refill the magazine and still grant you that melee energy. And then finally, if you do have the Catalyst, which is almost a must in my opinion if you are running this with this build, but if we take a look at it, it says precision final blows spawn a stasis crystal active victim's location. Collecting stasis shards gradually overflows the magazine. So this gun will now grant headstone. So now every time you get a precision kill, not only are you going to spawn that stasis shard if Creeping Attrition is active, you will also make a stasis crystal, which you can then shoot to also make another stasis shard, and all these will track to you and constantly reload the magazine. The other part is that when you collect stasis shards, it will now overflow the magazine. So you don't ever have to really reload this gun at all either, because all the stasis shards you're making from this weapon itself and Grim Harvest means you're always going to be at the max overflow charge of this weapon. And like I said earlier, everything involved with this gun will synergize with everything in the subclass. Anything you can think of involved with stasis shards, crystals, slow, freeze, anything, they will play off of each other, and that's why I think Wicked Implement with the Catalyst is extremely strong paired with the Stasis subclass. But before we jump into our other weapons, I do want to talk about our artifact perks really quick, because Stasis didn't really get anything at all for this season, but there are 2 main mods and kind of a third one that works really well with Wicked Implement in the overall build in general. The first mod is going to be semi-auto striker. So if you have fewer than 2 stacks of armor charge, rapid precision shots with bows, snipers, and scout rifles generating an armor charge. This is really nice because Wicked Implement, if you're sitting far back, you're gonna just always have an armor charge up. This is obviously just a nice way to generate yourself an armor charge. You're making shards and armor charges now with your primary weapon. On top of that, you also have things like rapid fire rangers, so rapid precision hits against distant combatants to weaken them for a short duration. This is very nice because, again, if you're sitting far back with the Wicked Implement, you're going to be proccing that, always weakening enemies on a Stasis subclass. And since you're freezing enemies with Wicked Implement, you also can proc Whisper of Rending, so that primary ammo does more damage. So this gun is basically being able to weaken enemies alongside giving that extra damage, since it can inherently freeze enemies on its own. And then the final perk is going to be Monochromatic Maestro, so dealing elemental ability damage increases matching weapon damage, and elemental weapon damage increases matching ability damage. Bonus granted is 10% for 5 seconds. This is kind of that third one that can kind of help out with the build, because since you're going to be throwing a lot of Duskfield grenades, this just means you can buff your Wicked Implement damage even more. Obviously, your abilities, other than maybe something like your melee, aren't doing a crazy amount of damage, but you will get increased ability damage with Monochromatic Maestro. But the main thing is, if you're throwing a melee, you're throwing your grenade, you're going to be able to buff the Wicked Implement damage even more. We've talked a lot about the Wicked Implement. I really hope I've sold it to you all. It is a pretty good weapon with this build. But obviously, this is more of a single target damage weapon. They did give it headstone, so it is a lot better for ad clear now, but you pretty much want to take a very, very good special weapon for ad clear. Obviously, Forbearance is going to be a great option for this, but if you don't have Forbearance, taking another Waveframe grenade launcher could be good. Taking a fusion rifle with Reservoir Burst could also be extremely strong. Just anything that is really good for ad clear. So if you're in a very high dense ad scenario, you could just shoot a special weapon, kill everything, and then you could use this for more a long range engagement and just reap the benefits of all the Stasis synergy that it can give. And then for your heavy weapon, just run anything that's currently in the meta. It doesn't matter too much, but obviously you still want to do some damage. But now let's jump over into armor mods, and if you all like to see an infographic of this build, be sure to head over to Mobalytics. I will link everything down in the description, and you can read over everything while I go over it in the video. But alright, starting off with our helmet, first off, we're going to be running a Harmonic Siphon. So rapid stasis weapon final blows create an orb of power. This is going to be really good because orbs will grant you armor charge, and since you're getting a bunch of kills with Wicked Implement, that means you're going to be making a bunch of orbs. Now the thing is, with this Stasis build, you don't really have to take anything else because your grenades are not getting kills or ashes to assets. Hands on would be okay because since you are regenerating your melee energy a lot, but even then it's not the craziest thing since Silence Fall is not the best super in the game. So I opted just to run a heavy ammo finder, so it increases the drop chance of heavy ammo on kill. This actually does give bonus benefits if you are running an exotic weapon. Since you're running Wicked Implement, you're going to proc this a lot more often. And then also heavy ammo scout, so when one of your ammo finder perks creates a brick of heavy ammo for you, it also creates bricks of heavy ammo for your allies. I chose this because now if I'm making heavy ammo with this, I can also make it for my teammates, and it kind of makes it more of a support role, which is really good because again, Renewal Grasp plays heavily into being a support based exotic, so you can keep your teammates alive with a bunch of damage resistance and slowing enemies around you. But for my arms, I do like to take a momentum transfer, so causing damage with a grenade reduces your melee cooldown. Your grenades are never getting kills, but they will do damage, so this will proc, so you get some more melee cooldown. On top of that, bolstering detonation, so it grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a grenade. Again, same thing, you can throw your grenade, you're going to get some class ability energy since it will do damage. And then I also like to take a grenade kickstart, so when your grenade energy is fully expended, you gain grenade energy. Additionally, your armor charge is consumed and gain additional grenade energy for each stack. This is why armor charge is going to be extremely strong for this build, since you're going to be making orbs with your Wicked Implement. This just means you can get even more grenade energy, then you can shoot those crystals to get even more, and you can spam Duskfields all the time. Again, kind of with this build, things like firepower are not going to work because you can't really get kills with your grenade. Heavy handed would work, but it's not the main focus of this build. That's why I don't take it. And you don't really need to take a loader mod because the gun already reloads itself every time you pick a Stasis shard up, and you're going to be doing that all the time. Now for our chest piece, always run resistant mods. You're trying to be extremely tanky with this build, and pretty much just any build, you're always going to be taking 3 resistant mods and just swap these out for whatever content you're going into. And then for our boots, I do like to run a recuperation, so replenishes health each time you pick up an orb of power. This is very nice since you're going to be making orbs all the time. Your teammates are going to be making orbs. You can just get health when you run over an orb. On top of that, I do like to take a better already, so your health begins to regenerate immediately after picking up an orb of power. This is a nice paired in tandem with recuperation, because now when you pick up an orb, you get a chunk of health, but you also restart that regeneration, so if nothing's shooting you, you will get back to full health immediately. This kind of negates running 100 recovery, so if you are running both of these and want to try to get 100 mobility, that is something I would highly recommend doing. But this is just very nice. Again, you want to be very tanky with this build, and you want to have as much survivability as possible, and I think these both do that extremely well. Now, I also like to run an innervation, so it reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. So this is going to be, again, good to spam your Duskfield grenades. Since you're always picking orbs up, you're constantly healing, and you're also going to be getting extra grenade energy. You could opt in to take something like an absolution to get even more grenade energy, but with everything already playing into the Duskfield energy, you don't really need more than just one innervation, in my opinion, and even absolution doesn't add a lot to it. So that's why I just opted in to take it better already, just so I can constantly keep healing every time I pick these orbs up. And then finally, for our cloak, these don't matter that much, but I do like to run a bomber, so it reduces my grenade cooldown when using my class ability. This is just nice, so if I can throw a Duskfield and then I shoot my weapon, dodge to reload, I get some Duskfield energy back, which could, you know, obviously be good to throw another one out. And I also like to run a powerful attraction, so automatically collects nearby orbs of power when you activate your class ability. Again, if I just activate my class ability, I can just pick up some orbs around me. Then I will also get my grenade kickstart ready to proc with 3 armor charges, which is very, very nice. And then I also like to run a Reaper, so after using your class ability, your next weapon, Final Blow, spawns an orb of power. So since you can use your class ability a lot, you can just make more orbs that way, but you can kind of swap these out for almost anything you want to. Things like Proximity War is going to be pretty good. Even if you want to take something like Outreach, you can also do that to get your melee energy back. These are kind of just up to you, but if you are playing heavily into your class ability based mods, I would highly recommend getting to 100 mobility if possible. But that is pretty much the build. Again, you can use this defensively, throw it on the ground, standing your Duskfield. You can use that Stasis crystal to get even higher damage resistance and kind of as a pseudo wall. You can use it offensively by throwing it, shooting that crystal, freezing enemies, slowing enemies. You're going to get insane grenade cooldown rate. You also even have things like Wicked Implement, which synergizes extremely well with this build, and then pairing that with things like Semi-Auto Striker and Rapid Fire Ranger, so you can weaken enemies and keep armor charge up on you at all times. And on top of that, with Whisper and Vending, you will get that increased primary damage, and it makes your exotic weapon very, very strong. There's a bunch of different ways you can play with this build, and with the change that came through with this season, it has made it rise to the top. Like I do at the end of all these videos, if you were curious about my transmog, this is what I'm running. If you want to make your hunter look like this, I did end up using the ornament for Renewal grass. I guess I tried to make him look like a winter themed hunter with his beanie and scarf on. I'm pretty sure I even used the Beyond Light legs. I'm pretty sure that's what they are. And kind of like, you know, maybe like ice shards on them or something. I think it looks pretty cool, and if you want to make it look like this, just be sure to copy it down. But all right, that is going to do it all for me. Let me know what you all think about this build in the comments below. Have you been running a Renewal grass build in the past? Did you run it way back ago before they nerfed it and you excited to try it out again? It's been a ton of fun to mess around with, and with the Wicked Implement buffs, it has made this a top tier build in my opinion. Anyways though, I really hope y'all enjoy. Thank y'all so much for watching, and have a great day.